Today, we're diving into the incredible life and, well, the pretty mysterious death of a true legend, Yuri Gagarin, the very first human to go to space.
108. That's it. That's how many minutes it took for Yuri Gagarin to circle our entire planet and, change absolutely everything.
And then there's this number, 34. That's how old he was when he died. A global icon, a national hero, whose final moments were not just tragic, but were buried under decades of official secrecy.
All right, let's go back. Picture this. April 12th, 1961. The entire world is basically holding its breath, because on that day, Yuri Gagarin blasted off in the Vostok 1, becoming the first human being ever to go into outer space. And, what a success it was. You see these numbers, just one orbit, 108 minutes. But this wasn't just some technical achievement. Oh no. In the middle of the Cold War, this was a massive, massive win for the Soviet Union. A huge propaganda coup. So you have to ask, who was this guy? Who was the man in that tiny capsule? Well, as it turns out, he was the perfect person for the job. Almost. Manufactured for the moment by the Soviet state.
Just look at this trajectory. His life story was frankly a propagandist's dream. He comes from these incredibly humble beginnings, born on a collective farm. He lives through the Nazi occupation, and then rises all the way up through the military to become this top-tier pilot. You couldn't write it better. And this is where it gets really fascinating. His selection wasn't just about skill. It was this perfect mix of, well, propaganda needs and practical needs. Of course, he was an elite pilot. But check this out. He was also short, just 5'2", maybe because of malnutrition as a kid during the war. That made him the perfect size for that cramped capsule. And that famous beaming smile, that made him the perfect face for the Soviet Union.
Okay, so you have this perfect hero, this perfect mission, right? Well, not exactly. That flawless story that was told to the world, it had a few pretty big secrets tucked away, right from the start. Here's the big one. For years, the Soviets flat out lied about how he landed. The mission didn't end quite the way they said it did. And the reason they hid the truth wasn't about safety or technology. Nope. It was all about politics. So this is what actually happened. He didn't ride the capsule all the way down. He actually ejected at 7 kilometers up and parachuted down on his own, while the empty capsule landed somewhere else. So why lie? Because at the time, the International Body for Flight Records had this rule. To get the official world record, the pilot had to land with their aircraft. So they just kind of fudged the details. All right, let's fast forward 7 years. Gagarin is now a global superstar, a living symbol of Soviet power. And then, his story takes a sudden, very tragic turn. So, after years of being a global ambassador, which ironically meant he wasn't allowed to fly much, Gagarin was finally getting back in the cockpit to requalify as a fighter pilot. But on March 27, 1968, what was supposed to be a totally routine flight ended in a fatal crash. The official story came out fast, and it was very, very neat. The State Commission basically said it was pilot error. They blamed Gagarin and his instructor, pointing to bad weather. But let's be real, almost nobody bought it. It just felt too simple, too convenient. And they were right to be suspicious. Decades later, another legendary cosmonaut, Alexei Leonov, the first guy to do a spacewalk, he came forward with a bombshell. He'd seen the classified files, and he said another jet, a supersonic fighter, flew way too close to Gagarin's plane, sending it into a death spiral. So basically, we're left with these 3 competing theories. You've got the official pilot error story, which most people now see as a cover-up. Then you have Leonov's account, which is probably the most credible, that points to some serious, deadly negligence by the military. And of course, you have the conspiracy theories that it was an assassination. There's no real proof for that, but you can see why people went there, given all the secrecy. So where does all this leave us? You have the hero, the lies, the mystery. What does it all mean for how we remember Yuri Gagarin? It's like there are 2 Gagarins, really. There's the public myth, the perfect Soviet hero, the first man in space, the guy we celebrate every year. And then there's the private truth, a man who was trapped by his own fame, his life and death controlled by the state, all to protect the image of the military and the government. And I think this really says it all. His widow, Valentina, she never remarried. And look at the title of her memoir, 108 minutes and the whole life. It's just so powerful. It's like those 108 minutes in orbit became his entire existence, overshadowing everything else right up to the very end.
Which leaves us with this final question. For Gagarin, and for any hero really, what's the real legacy? Is it the perfect myth that we all celebrate? Or is it the messy, complicated truth that we have to dig for?